Hello, one of the listeners. This time I'm recording another one of the personal ones I have written because, shockingly, I am having a hard time getting permission from other authors to do their stuff. Either they don't want to be on a monetized platform, or there's two people writing the story, and they can't get a response from one chap. So this is The Seahorse Effect by C.R. Steinberger, based off the movie series Star Wars. Narrated for you by Sierra Feast, who is also the author. Chapter 1. The Vision. Anakin jolted awake and quickly looked over to where Padme had been sleeping next to him. Relieved, he let his head fall back into the pillow for a moment. It was all right. She was safe. It was just a dream. But I never have just dreams, he mourned internally. He slipped out from under the covers and swung his legs over the side of the bed, resting his elbow on his bent knee and putting his forehead in his mechanical hand. "Annie?" a hesitant voice asked from behind him. He looked over his shoulder and saw his wife also getting up. He must have woken her. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," he replied. She frowned at him. "Anakin, we've talked about this. You have to be honest with me, especially when something's upset you." "It was just a dream," he protested. She crawled across the bed and ran a hand over his shoulders. "Tell me anyway." He shook his head. "It was like the dreams I used to have about my mother." Her hand paused momentarily on his back as Padme realized what he meant. Then she resumed and asked, "What did you see, Annie?" Bluntly, he answered, "You die in childbirth." "And the baby?" The hand lifted from his back, and he had a feeling she was pressing her stomach. He'd seen her doing that all day, and it had given him joy unlike anything he'd felt before, even on the days following their wedding. But now it just made him draw further into his ball. "I don't think they make it." Anakin leaned down over the bed, running his flesh hand through his short curls. Putting his mechanical hand in his hair never turned out well, but it wasn't nearly as painful as what he'd just seen. He'd watched Padme, his beloved, his queen, in such pain, and when it had ended, there'd been nothing. No cry of a newborn, no one rejoicing over the new life. Just his dead wife. His stomach flipped at the thought. "I lose you, them, everyone." She stopped running her hands over his back and hugged him close. "It will be all right," she whispered soothingly into his ear. He reached out with the force and nudged her presence to gather some of her calm to himself. Fear, at the roiling, nearly bowled him over. He pulled away from her, staring. "You don't really think that." She went to protest, but he continued on. "You're afraid, I can feel it, so why are you lying to me? You always say to be honest with each other." He stood up, crossing the room. "You are the one person I thought would never lie to me. Why?" His voice rose until he almost shouted the last words. Obi-Wan, the council, they'd all lied to him. They lied because they didn't trust him. Was it the same with her? Did she also mistrust him? His own wife? He turned to face the window, looking out over the sky traffic, fists curling and uncurling. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he let the force siphon off his anger and calm his rage back to a mere simmer. He turned back to Padme, sitting on the bed still, though her arm was outstretched as if to call him back. "Why are you scared?" he asked. She looked down for a moment before meeting his eyes, and this time they matched the turmoil he'd sensed. Her hands drifted towards her stomach where their child rested. Their child, who would be in danger soon if Anakin's vision held any shred of truth. "I'm scared because even if I died, I could still be happy knowing the baby would live," she whispered, and he understood. "I'm scared that they might never get to live. They're not even 2 months old yet." She looked back up at him. "And I lied because I wanted to comfort you and because one of us has to be strong." She paused and took a deep breath. "And also because I don't want you to be afraid, because I've seen what happens to you when you're afraid." "What do you mean?" he demanded. She looked away from him. "The last time you were afraid like this, you found your mother tortured and killed everyone who did that to her. Annie, I remember how broken you were after that about your mother and about what you did." She looked back up at him. "I don't want that to happen to you again and again. I'm not a Jedi, but I think acting like you did isn't good for you, and I don't want that to happen to you." He remembered that time and knew she was right. He'd been letting his fear cloud everything. How many times had Obi-Wan chastised him for that before? He let his fear drain into the Force and walked back over to the bed. Anakin sat down beside her again and gently placed a hand over hers where it rested on her belly. At little more than a month, there was nothing there yet to show the precious burden she carried, but he still smiled.
You don't have to be afraid, Padme. I won't do that again. There's something else I could do, though.
He took her hand and squeezed it.
I'm going to find a way to save you. Both of you.
Then he kissed her sweetly, savoring her soft lips after almost a month of separation. If she could be strong, he would be too. Hadn't he always wanted to be strong enough to save those he loved from dying? Hadn't he said that after his mother died? Well, now was the time to prove he could.